The bus left me at the junction of a gravel track and nothing else. The driver didn't meet my eyes. He just pointed a thick finger at the path, winding up into the gray-green foothills, grunted and reversed back toward the hazy smudge of the town 30 miles south. The air was thin and carried the scent of damp stone and pine. My duffel felt heavier than it was. According to the terse, single-page contract in my pocket, I was to follow the track for precisely 4.5 miles to outpost Kanchenjunga 7, my new home, my new job. The walk was a silent, uphill slog. The contract promised a significant monthly deposit into an account I'd opened just for this purpose. It was more money than I'd seen in 5 years of civilian logistics work. It was enough to erase the debt my father left, the kind of debt that doesn't just harass you with letters, but sits in your stomach like a cold stone. I needed the stone gone. So I walked. The outpost wasn't what I'd pictured. No, barbed wire, no guard towers. It was a single, low-slung concrete blockhouse, painted a fading military green, nestled against a sheer rock face. A steel door, a few reinforced windows, a satellite dish, a skeletal radio mast. A diesel generator hummed from a shed 20 yards to the east. A figure stood by the door, perfectly still, watching my approach. "Corporal Aristapa," he said as I dropped my duffel. He was my age, maybe a few years older, with a calm, worn face and eyes that didn't seem to blink enough. He wore standard-issue cold weather gear, no insignia. "You are the new logistics and communications specialist." "That's me," I said, offering a hand. He looked at it, then turned and opened the steel door. "Come in, the supervisor is waiting." The interior was one long room, divided by function. A kitchenette with a propane stove, a communications desk cluttered with radio equipment, and 2 monitors showing static, 2 bunks, a map table, and a wall of locked supply cabinets. It was warm, lit by harsh fluorescent bars, and smelled of old coffee, diesel, and something faintly metallic. A man in his 50s, with a shaved head and a posture that screamed career military, stood over the map table. He didn't look up. "Sir, the new specialist," Thapa announced. "Sit," the supervisor said. His name, I would learn, was Sergeant Major Dravid. He pushed a packet of papers toward me. "Read, sign. Your contract began the moment you stepped onto the track. You are now in operational territory." The papers were more detailed than my initial contract. Shift rotations, radio frequencies, supply inventory codes. And then, on the last page, a separate sheet titled Post-Operational Parameters. It was a list. 1. The main door is to be locked from the inside at all times. The key is to be kept on the hook to the left of the door. It is never to be placed in a pocket or on your person. 2. The generator shed is to be checked for fuel levels and integrity at 9 in the morning and 9 in the evening. The check must not exceed 5 minutes. If you hear movement inside the shed that is not the generator, you are to finish the fuel check, lock the shed, and return to the blockhouse. Do not investigate. 3. Between the hours of 10 at night and 4 in the morning, the south-facing window is to be covered with the blackout shutter. Between 4 and 4:10 in the morning, the shutter must be removed. It must remain uncovered until 10 at night. 4. The radio must be monitored on Channel 6 at all times. Any transmission not on Channel 6 is to be ignored. Do not respond, even if it uses your name or this post's designation. 5. A full inventory of supplies in Cabinet C must be conducted at 2 in the afternoon. Any discrepancy in the count of sodium chloride packets is to be reported in the logbook immediately. 6. If you observe a figure on the western tree line between dusk and dawn, you are to turn off all interior lights for a period of 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, you may resume normal lighting. 7. Do not acknowledge a second knock. The first knock requires a verbal standby. A second knock means you are to remain silent and move to the center of the room until you hear the generator cycle. 8. Personal mirrors are not permitted. The reflective surface in the washroom is sufficient. Do not use the washroom mirror after 1 in the morning. 9. Patrols are conducted along the prescribed perimeter path every 6 hours, beginning on the hour. The patrol must take exactly 27 minutes. If you complete it in less than 25 or more than 29 minutes, you are to return to the blockhouse and not patrol again until the next scheduled cycle. 10. If a member of the Nepali Army Border Patrol approaches, you are to request the weekly password via the exterior speaker. If they do not provide it, you are to repeat, "Stand by for verification." And observe from the south window. A genuine patrol will wait. An imitation will depart within 5 minutes. 11. All logbook entries are to be written in blue ink. Red ink is reserved for discrepancy reports only. 12. If you encounter a stray dog within 50 yards of the post, do not offer it food or water. Note its color and direction of travel in the logbook. 13. The water level in the cistern is to be measured at noon. If the level has dropped more than 2 centimeters from the previous day's measurement without explanation, add 2 sodium chloride packets from cabinet C to the water and note the event in red ink. 14. You are never to say "I am alone" over any communications device, including the internal intercom. I read it twice. The cold stone in my gut shifted. Operational parameters? Dravid finally looked at me. His eyes were the color of flint. Rules. You follow them. Your job is logistics and comms. Your primary duty is to follow these rules. The C, outpost runs on procedure. Deviation is operational failure. Do you understand? It sounded like superstitious nonsense. Haunted house rules for soldiers. But the money was real. The debt was real. I understand. Corporal Thapa will run you through 2 full shift cycles. You will shadow him. You will not deviate from his instructions. After 48 hours, you will assume the night watch solo. Any questions? I had 100. I asked the one that seemed safest. What am I logisticsing for? What's the actual mission here? Dravid's expression didn't change. The mission is the maintenance of outpost Kanchenjunga 7. That is all you require. Thapa, begin the orientation. Thapa was a man of few words. Over the next 2 days, he showed me the rhythm. The generator check was a quick, tense affair. The shed was dark, smelling of oil and cold metal. He shone his light on the fuel gauge, tapped it, noted the reading on a clipboard, and was backing, out before I'd fully entered. He never looked into the shadows in the corner. At 2 in the afternoon, he opened cabinet C. It was filled with mundane supplies, batteries, dehydrated meals, medical kits. On the top shelf were 12 small, foil-wrapped packets, marked Knuckle. He counted them aloud. 12. He made me count them. I got 12. He logged it in blue ink. As dusk bled into the valley, he closed the blackout shutter over the south window with a definitive clang. At exactly 9 in the evening, we did the generator check again. The night was utterly black, the silence so complete the generator's hum felt like an intrusion. Through the north window, I could see the dark mass of the tree line, about 200 yards distant. Will we see the figure? I asked, trying to sound detached. Sometimes, Thapa said, not looking up from his logbook. If you do, remember Rule 6. Lights off for 3 minutes, not 2, not 4. Use the stopwatch. Pointed to a digital stopwatch next to the light switch. My first solo watch began at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday night. Thapa had gone to his bunk, his breathing evening out into sleep with unnatural speed. Dravid was sealed in the small supervisor's closet he used as an office. The outpost was mine. The first hour was silence and paperwork. I monitored Channel 6, static. I checked the south window shutter, secure. At 1 a.m, I felt a need to use the washroom. I remembered Rule 8. The washroom was a closet-sized space with a small sink and a metal mirror. My reflection looked pale, stretched. I finished quickly and avoided looking at the mirror as I left. At 2:14 in the morning, the radio on Channel 6 crackled to life. A voice, strained and thin, whispered, "K7, this is Border Patrol Team Gamma. We have a man down. Request assistance at Grid 7 Alpha 9er. Do you copy?" My hand moved toward the microphone. A man down. Then my fingers stopped. The transmission was on Channel 6, but Rule 4 was explicit. Any transmission not on Channel 6 is to be ignored. It didn't say to ignore all outside transmissions. This was on the right channel. This was a genuine distress call, but Rule 10 specified the weekly password for Border Patrol. This caller hadn't asked for entry. They'd asked for remote assistance, a loophole. My heart hammered against my ribs, a man down. I was here to maintain the post, not to abandon soldiers. I keyed the mic. Border Patrol Gamma, this is K7. Authenticate with weekly password. Over. The static hissed back at me. For 10 long seconds, nothing. Then the whisper returned, closer now, as if the speaker's lips were against the grill. "No time, he's bleeding. 7 Alpha 9er, please." The coordinates were for a point just beyond the western tree line, a place I could theoretically reach. I looked at the rules list, pinned next to the radio. Rule 4, Rule 10. They conflicted. Or did they? Rule 10 was for approaches. This was a radio call. I made a decision. I keyed the mic again, my voice tight. Stand by for verification. I went to the south window, peered out through the small, thick pane of glass not covered by the shutter. Nothing but darkness. I waited. The stopwatch on the desk ticked past 1 minute. 2. At 4 minutes and 50 seconds, I saw a flicker of movement at the tree line. A single, dark shape detached itself from the deeper black of the trees. It didn't walk. It seemed to stutter, moving in brief, jerky increments. It wasn't carrying anyone. It wasn't moving like an injured man was being supported. It was alone. It faced the outpost. My blood went cold. An imitation will depart within 5 minutes. The shape stood, a stiller darkness in the night. At exactly 4 minutes and 58 seconds, it turned and melted back into the trees. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My hands were trembling. I hadn't broken a rule. I had followed Rule 10's verification procedure, even though the contact was radio first. The rules had layers. They anticipated deception. Nothing else happened that night. At 4 a.m, my body aching with tension, I opened the south window shutter. The pale gray light of pre-dawn revealed the empty, mist-wreathed clearing. It looked peaceful. When Thapa emerged at 6, I told him about the radio call and the figure. He listened, then nodded. "You used the verification protocol. Good. The password changes tomorrow. It will be Firmament. Remember it." "What was that, Thapa? Really?" He poured himself coffee. The rules are the rules. You followed them. The post is secure. That is the only answer. Dravid was less forgiving. He reviewed the log I'd written. You hesitated. You considered responding to an unauthenticated request. That is a failure of discipline. The rules are not guidelines. They are a binary system. Follow or fail. The transmission was on channel 6, I argued weakly. And did it provide the password? Dravid's stare was impenetrable. No, therefore, it was not a genuine Border Patrol transmission. Rule 4 exists because they can use our channels. Your duty is to the post, not to phantoms on the radio. Another hesitation like that will be noted in your permanent record. The implied threat was clear. The money, the debt clearance, it was all contingent on compliance. The stone in my gut grew colder, heavier. The cycles began to blur. Check the generator, count the salt packets, patrol for 27 minutes. I learned the exact number of steps from the blockhouse door to the generator shed. 73. I learned that the diesel tank took exactly 48 hours to drop from full to 3/4. And that was the trigger for a supply request. The mundanity of it was a kind of cage. The rules were its bars. A week into my solo watches, I saw the figure on the tree line. It was just after midnight, during a patrol. I was on the eastern arc, counting my steps to time the return, when I felt the prickle on my neck. I looked west. There it was. A humanoid silhouette, standing at the exact edge where the stunted pines met the rocky scree. It was too tall, too thin. It didn't move. Rule 6. I abandoned the patrol, walking quickly, but not running back to the blockhouse. I stepped inside, locked the door, and flipped the main light switch. Darkness plunged down. I fumbled for the stopwatch, started it. In the black, the hum of the electronics seemed louder. The red numerals of the clock read 12:18. I stood in the center of the room, my back to the wall, facing the door. I heard nothing. After 1 minute, my eyes adjusted. The faint glow from the radio dial provided a sickly light. After 2 minutes, I heard a faint scraping sound from the roof. A slow, deliberate drag, like something heavy being pulled across the corrugated metal. I kept my eyes on the stopwatch. 2:47, 2:48, 2:49. At exactly 3 minutes, I hit the light switch. The room flooded with light. The scraping sound stopped. I went to the south window. The figure was gone. My patrol timer was ruined. I logged the event, noting the time of the sighting and the 3-minute blackout. I did not patrol again until the next cycle. The following afternoon, Dravid posted a new sheet next to the original rules. The heading read, Amendments to Operational Parameters. 1. Verification protocol for radio contact is now mandatory for all external communications, regardless of channel. The response phrase is stand by for verification. Do not deviate from this phrase. 2. Patrols are suspended if a tree line figure is sighted. The subsequent patrol may only commence after a full inventory of Cabinet C has been completed and logged. 3. The sodium chloride packet count is now to be conducted twice daily, at 2 in the afternoon and at 11 at night. 4. If a scraping sound is audible from the roof or walls, increase the volume of the generator shed monitor by 10 decibels. Do not investigate the source. 5. The cistern water measurement is now to include a taste test. 1 drop on the back of the hand. 5. If it tastes sweet, add 4 sodium chloride packets, not 2. 6. Never look directly at a stray dog. Peripheral vision observation only. Note the color. 7. The blackout shutter on the south window must be physically latched at the top and bottom. After 10 p.m., verify the latch by pulling firmly twice. 8. If you experience the sensation of being watched from within the blockhouse, open cabinet C and place 1 sodium chloride packet on the floor in the center of the room. Leave it for 1 hour, then dispose of it in the sanitary incinerator. 9. All logbook entries regarding auditory anomalies must specify the direction, e.g., roof northwest quadrant. 10. The phrase "I am secure" is the only acceptable alternative to standby in radio communications. Never confirm or deny your status as alone. The amendments tightened the cage. The rules now governed not just actions, but perceptions and sensations. The taste of the water. A feeling of being watched. They were treating my own senses as potential liabilities. The next night, during the 11 p.m. salt count, I had 12 packets. I closed the cabinet. As I turned to log it, I heard a clear, soft tap on the main door. I froze. Rule 7. I took a breath. Stand by. Silence. Then a second tap, identical to the first. My mouth went dry. Do not acknowledge a second knock. I moved silently to the center of the room, as prescribed. I stood there, my ears straining. I heard the generator outside chug through its regular cycle. Then a third tap. This one was different, slower, more insistent. It was not a knock. It was the sound of a single fingertip, dragging down the steel from top to bottom. I didn't move. I focused on the generator's sound. After an eternity, it cycled off, leaving a brief silence before its hum resumed. The dragging sound had stopped. I waited a full 5 minutes before returning to the comms desk. My log entry was brief. 23-7, single, knock. Rule 7 enacted. No further incident. But it was an incident. The perimeter of my world was shrinking, pressed inward by the things the rules held at bay. Thapa left on the monthly resupply convoy. It was just Dravid and me for 72 hours. The silence between us was heavier than the mountain air. On the second night, during a driving sleet storm that rattled the shutters, the power failed. The fluorescence died with a pop. The monitors went black. Only the emergency battery packs on the radio and the red digital clock remained, casting a hellish glow. Dravid was out of his office in an instant, a flashlight in his hand. His face was grim in the backscatter. "Storm's taken the generator," he shouted over the howl of the wind. "Emergency protocols, now." He yanked a third sheet of paper from a locked drawer under the map table. It was laminated. He slapped it on the desk next to the glowing radio. Emergency protocols, active during total power loss. 1. Ignite the kerosene lantern. It must remain lit and placed on the map table. Do not let it go out. 2. Switch radio to emergency battery and monitor channel 2. Acknowledge any hail from base with K7 on backup. 3. Seal the ventilation shutters using the red-handled cranks. This will take approximately 8 minutes. Begin with the east shutter. 4. One person must maintain physical contact with the central support column at all times. 5. Salt line. Create an unbroken line of sodium chloride packets along the interior perimeter of all exterior walls. Use all packets from cabinet C. 6. If you hear a voice you recognize calling your name from outside, you are to respond with verification required. Once, then silence. 7. The patrol schedule is suspended. Do not approach any window or door. 8. If the lantern flame turns blue, extinguish it immediately and activate the handheld UV light from the emergency kit. Do not use white light until the flame burns normal again. 9. Time all events. Report duration of power loss in final log. Move, Dravid ordered, already heading for the ventilation control panel near the east wall. I fumbled for the kerosene lantern, my hands shaking. I lit it. The warm, wavering light made the shadows dance wildly. I placed it on the map table. The wind screamed like a living thing. Dravid cranked the first shutter closed with grunts of effort. I ran to cabinet C, pulled out the box of salt packets. 12 of them. I began tearing them open, pouring a thin, white line along the base of the walls. The concrete was cold. The salt hissed as it spilled. "Channel 2!" Dravid yelled. I scrambled to the radio, switched the frequency. Static, then a broken voice. 7, do you copy? Status? I keyed the mic. K, 7, on backup. Total power loss. Enacting emergency protocols. Acknowledged. Storm cell is severe. Expect isolation 12 to 18 hours. Maintain protocols. Base out. The contact was a thread to sanity. I returned to the salt line. I reached the south wall, near the blacked out window. As I poured the salt, I heard something above the wind. A voice. It was my sister's voice, Sarah, clear as day, filled with panic. John, are you in there? Please open the door. It's out here." My blood turned to ice. Sarah was in Portland. She had no idea where I was. Dravid stopped cranking the west shutter, his head cocked. He heard it too. His eyes locked on mine. He pointed to Rule 6 on the laminated sheet, then drew a finger across his throat. The voice came again, closer, right outside the door. It was sobbing. "John, please, for God's sake, it's coming." Every instinct screamed to respond, to yell back that she wasn't real. I gripped a salt packet until the foil bit into my palm. I took a shuddering breath and spoke toward the door, my voice flat and dead. "Verification required." The ijou, sobbing stopped, abruptly. The silence that followed was worse. Then a new sound. A dry, papery rustling, like many legs skittering over the metal roof. It moved from one side to the other, then seemed to gather directly above us. Dravid finished the last shutter. The air in the blockhouse grew still and stale. He moved to the central support column, a thick steel I-beam, and placed his hand on it. "Contact!" he barked. I hurried over, pressing my own back against the cold steel, my shoulder touching his. We stood there, two men holding up a world of darkness by touching a pole. The kerosene lantern flickered. The rustling moved to the walls. It was a testing, probing sound, circling the structure. It would pause at the sealed ventilation grills, then move on. It stopped at the main door. We heard the handle rattle, once, gently. Then the dragging fingertip sound again, this time in a slow circle around the doorframe. The lantern flame dipped, guttered, and burned, a steady pale blue. "Now!" Dravid hissed. I lunged for the lantern, turned the knob to extinguish it. Darkness absolute but for the tiny red clock numbers. 1:03 a.m. I found the emergency kit, pulled out the heavy UV light. I thumbed the switch. The room erupted in an actinic, purple glow. It was a nightmare inversion. Everything fluoresced in unnatural shades. The salt line glowed a brilliant, ghostly white. Our faces were ghastly masks. And on the walls, shadows. Not cast by anything in the room, but pressed against the outside of the concrete, visible through the material itself in the UV spectrum. They were long, spindly, grasping shapes, clustering at the door, the windows, the vents. They had no discernible features, only a frantic, reaching quality. They moved in a slow, relentless press, trying to find a way in. Where the salt line glowed, they did not touch the wall. They hovered just above it, repelled. Dravid's breath was a ragged sawing next to me. "Don't break the salt line," he whispered. "Don't lose contact with the column." We stood. My legs began to ache, then burn. The UV light grew hot in my hand. The shadows pressed and probed. An hour passed. The clock read 2:14. Another hour, 3:22. The cold seeped into our bones. The shadows never left. They just shifted, a silent, patient audience. At 4:10 in the morning, Dravid nodded toward the south window. "The shutter," he croaked. "Rule 3. It must be uncovered between 4 and 4:10. "We can't," I whispered, my voice cracking. "The protocol says not to approach the windows." "The rules are hierarchical," he said, his eyes hollow in the UV light. "The permanent rules supersede emergency protocols unless explicitly contradicted. There is no contradiction. The shutter must be opened." It was madness to approach that wall with those shadows pressed against it, to break the perimeter of the salt line, which I would have to step over. "If we break a permanent rule, none of this matters," Dravid said, as if reading my terror. "You must do it. Maintain contact with the column until the last second. Move quickly. Re-establish the salt line if you disturb it." My body rebelled. Every cell screamed to stay put, to hide. I thought of the money. I thought of the cold stone of debt. I thought of the rules, the only thing holding the madness back. I let go of the column. The UV light wavered in my grip. I took a step toward the south window. The shadows on that wall grew more agitated, swarming toward the frame of the shutter. I reached the salt line. I had to step over it. I lifted my foot, stepped across the glowing white trail. A wave of dizziness hit me, a scent like ozone and burnt hair. I stumbled, caught myself on the edge of the map table. The lantern rattled. I righted it. The shadows on the wall were directly in front of me now, a tangled knot of darkness inches from my face. I could feel a profound cold radiating through the concrete. My hands fumbled with the latches on the blackout shutter. Top latch, pull twice. It was secure. Bottom latch, pull twice. My fingers were numb. The clock read 4:06. I had 4 minutes. I released the latches. I gripped the shutter handle. I took a breath and pulled. The shutter slid up into its housing with a loud, rattling groan. Beyond the thick glass was pure black. The storm, the night. And pressed against the pane, distorting its features, was a face. It was pale and elongated. It had eyes that reflected the purple UV light back at me like an animal's. It wasn't human. It was an attempt at human, like a mask made of wax that had begun to melt and run. It stared directly at me. Its mouth, a dark slit, moved. No sound came through the reinforced glass, but I saw the words form on its lips. They were my sister's words, repeated. "John, please." I fell back. I scrambled away, my boots scattering, the salt line near the window. The shadows on the wall convulsed. The face outside tilted, watching my retreat. "The salt!" Dravid roared. I grabbed a half-empty packet from the floor, poured it in a frantic arc, repairing the break in the white line. The shadows writhed away from the fresh salt. I stumbled back to the support column, slamming my hand against it. The contact felt like grounding a live wire. The face at the window remained for another minute. At exactly 4:10, it slid away, downward, out of view. Dravid and I stood guard for the rest of the night. The storm began to abate around 5. At 6:30, with the gray dawn light seeping around the ventilation shutters, the generator coughed, sputtered, and roared back to life. The lights flickered on. The monitors beeped to life. The world returned to mundane fluorescent reality. We lowered the shutters. The morning revealed a landscape scoured clean by sleet. There were no footprints outside the south window, no marks on the glass. We did not speak of the face. We spent the day in exhausted, silent ritual, checking everything, counting everything. The salt packets were all gone. I logged it in red ink. All knuckle expended during e-protocol activation. Cabinet C empty. When Thapa returned with the convoy the next day, he took one look at us, at the red entry in the log, and simply nodded. He brought a new box of salt packets, 12 of them. Dravid left a week later. His rotation was over. His handoff was as sparse as his welcome. He reviewed my logs, made me recite the core rules and amendments from memory. He stopped me when I stumbled on the wording of Rule 14. Never say I am alone, I corrected myself. Remember it, he said. He handed me a single key on a chain. This is for the supervisor's closet. You are now the acting supervisor until relieved. The rules are your command. Enforce them without hesitation. Then he was gone, down the track to the waiting jeep. Just like that, the outpost was mine, truly mine. The weight of it was immense. The rules were no longer just instructions. They were the architecture of my survival. I followed them with a fanatic's precision. I counted steps, measured minutes, tasted water, avoided mirrors. The anomalies became routine. The figure on the tree line appeared every third night, on average. I'd kill the lights for 3 minutes. The scraping on the roof returned during heavy mists. I'd turn up the generator monitor. A stray dog, mangy and gray, circled the post at a distance of about 50 yards for 2 days. I noted its color and direction in the logbook, never looking directly at it. It left on the 3rd day. The loneliness was the hardest part. The radio was my only voice. Base checked in daily. Thapa handled the day shifts with his quiet competence. We exchanged only operational details. I found myself talking to the equipment, to the salt packets, to the ticking clock. I began to understand why the rules covered sensations, the feeling of being watched. In a place this empty, your own mind becomes an enemy, a source of false data. The rules were an external calibration. One night, during the 2 a.m. salt count, I had only 11 packets. I counted again. 11. The cold fist clenched in my stomach. I checked the log. The last count, at 11 p.m., was 12. I had been alone in the outpost since Thapa retired to his bunk at 10. No one had entered. No one could have. A discrepancy. Rule 5. Report immediately in the logbook. I reached for the red pen. My hand shook. A missing salt packet was a breach in the perimeter. It was a thing out of place. It was a problem with no physical explanation. As I uncapped the pen, I heard a faint, wet crunching sound from under my bunk. I froze. The sound came again. A deliberate, slow chewing. I knew what I had to do. Amendment 8. If you experience the sensation of being watched from within the blockhouse, I was certainly being watched. I could feel it, a pressure between my shoulder blades. And now there was a sound from inside my own bunk. I opened cabinet C. I took one of the 11 remaining salt packets. I walked to the center of the room. I placed the white packet on the concrete floor. Then I went to the comms desk. I sat. I did not look at the bunk. I did not look at the salt packet. I watched the clock. The chewing sound continued for precisely 17 minutes. Then it stopped. At the 1 hour mark, I stood. The salt packet lay where I left it, but it was no longer neatly squared. It was crumpled as if squeezed in a tight fist. The foil was torn at one corner. It was empty. I picked it up with 2 fingers, carried it to the small, hot incinerator slot next to the sanitary unit, and fed it to the flames. It sparked with a blue-green light. I returned to Cabinet C. I counted the packets again. There were 12. I did not sleep that night. I logged the discrepancy, the procedure, and the final count in a mixture of blue and red ink. My notes precise and clinical. The logbook was becoming a testament to a war fought with procedure and sodium chloride. The seasons turned. The wind grew colder, biting. I was running a patrol one evening, my path a worn groove in the hard earth, when I saw a light in the generator shed. It was on. A soft, yellow glow from the single bulb inside. The shed was dark at this hour. It should be dark. The bulb was only on during the 5-minute check windows. I stopped. My patrol timer read 1842. I was 17 minutes in. I had 10 minutes to complete the circuit and return. Rule 2. If you hear movement inside the shed that is not the generator, finish the fuel check, lock up, and leave. It didn't cover lights, but a light was an anomaly. An anomaly required a rule. I had no rule for this. I stood there, 60 yards from the shed, the wind whipping at my coat. The rational part of my mind suggested a short circuit, a timer malfunction. The part of my mind that lived by the list knew better. This was a test, or a lure. I had to check the fuel. It was 9 in the morning and 9 at night. It was not 9, but the light was on. An unscheduled check was not forbidden. It was simply not mentioned. The rules were a binary system. Do or do not. This was a do not. But the light was on. I broke the patrol. I walked toward the shed. My steps were not the 73 I was used to. I lost count at 50. The shed door was slightly ajar. A sliver of yellow light cut the twilight. I heard a voice from inside. It was Thapa's voice. He sounded weary, strained. "John, is that you? The generator's acting up. I need a hand." Thapa was in the blockhouse. I had left him there. He was doing inventory. He was not here. Rule 10. An imitation will depart within 5 minutes. But this was in the shed, not an approach, an invitation. "Thapa," I called, my voice thin. "In here, quickly." I pushed the door open wider. The generator sat in the center, chugging normally. The fuel gauge read half. The light bulb overhead swayed slightly, as if brushed. The shed was empty. The door swung shut behind me with a soft click. The light bulb flickered. Once, twice, the third flicker. Thapa was standing in the far corner, where the shadows were deepest. He was facing the wall. He was wearing his standard jacket, but the emblem on the shoulder was wrong. It was mirrored, a reverse image. "Thapa," I whispered. He didn't turn. "You shouldn't be here, John," his voice said, but it came from all around the shed, not from his still form. "This isn't your check time. You broke the patrol." I had broken a fundamental rhythm. I was out of sync. "The light was on," I said, my defense pathetic. "I know." The voice sighed, and it was no longer Thapa's. It was older, ragged. It was the voice from the radio that first night. "Lights can be so inviting." The figure by the wall began to turn. It moved slowly, stiffly, like something unused to the motion. I didn't wait to see its face. I yanked the shed door. It was stuck. I pulled again. It didn't budge. Panic, pure and electric, shot through me. I was in a box. I had broken a rule. I remembered the fuel check. Rule 2. Finish the fuel check, lock up, and leave. I hadn't finished the check. I forced myself to turn from the door, to look at the generator. I walked to it, my legs like wood. I noted the fuel level, half. I pretended to tap the gauge. I turned to leave. The figure was fully facing me now. It wore Thapa's face, but it was slack, expressionless. The eyes were dark pits. The mouth was a straight line. The mirrored emblem seemed to drink the light. It took a step toward me. I didn't run. Running was not in the rules. I walked with measured, deliberate steps to the door. I placed my hand on the handle. I said clearly and firmly, "Verification required." The thing stopped. It tilted its head. I pulled the door. It opened smoothly. I stepped out into the freezing evening air. I did not look back. I closed the shed door. I locked it with the key from my pocket. I walked, not ran, the 73 steps back to the blockhouse. My patrol was ruined. I was 11 minutes over the maximum time. Thapa was inside, counting batteries at the comms desk. He looked up as I entered. "You're late. The patrol—" "I saw a light in the shed," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I investigated. The door was ajar. I secured it." He studied me. His eyes flicked to my jacket, my boots, as if checking for something. "You went inside?" "I completed a fuel check and locked it. That was not your scheduled time." The light was an anomaly. I contained it. He held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Log it, in red, and add an amendment. I will draft it." The new amendment appeared that night, written in Thapa's neat hand. Amendment 11. Under no circumstances is the generator shed to be entered outside of scheduled check times. If an anomaly is observed, light, sound, open door, you are to return to the blockhouse immediately and observe from the south window for exactly 10 minutes. If the anomaly persists, contact base on Channel 2 for instruction. I had been given a rule for the next time. There would be a next time. The outpost was teaching me, through near breaches and consequences, how to survive it. The long winter night set in. The sun became a memory, a brief gray smudge on the southern horizon. The cold was a physical presence, seeping through the concrete. My world shrank to the glow of the monitors, the hiss of the radio, the count of the packets. One morning, after a routine check-in, Base's voice crackled with an unusual addition. "K7, prepare for relief. New specialist arriving on next supply convoy. ETA 7 days. You are to provide full orientation. Ensure parameters are clearly communicated." Relief. The word felt foreign. The thought of leaving this place, of returning to a world without these rules, was both a longing and a terror. What would I be out? There, a man who counted his steps, who tasted his water, who jumped at shadows. 7 days. I began the process of preparation. I audited everything. I made lists. I cleaned the rules, documents, removing coffee stains, smoothing creases. I was compiling a baton to pass. On the 5th night, the siege began. It started with the dogs. First one, then 3, then a silent pack of 7 or 8, gray and ragged, materializing out of the twilight. They did not bark. They did not approach. They simply sat in a wide, uneven circle around the outpost, about 50 yards out. Their heads were all turned toward the blockhouse. I noted the colors, the directions in the logbook. I did not look directly at them. Then the radios died, not the power, just the radios. Channel 6 emitted a low, atonal hum. Channel 2 was pure, screaming static. The landline to base was dead. We were cut off. Thapa looked at me, his usual calm finally fissured by a deep unease. This is not in the protocols. We make our own, I heard myself say. The rules had trained me. A problem was just a missing procedure. We go to emergency protocol footing, but we adapt. We have no power loss, so we keep the lights. We have no radio, so we maintain a listening watch on all dead channels in rotation. We double the salt count. We worked. We poured salt. We checked seals. We kept a lantern lit as a precaution. The dogs watched. At 10 p.m., the first knock came. A single, firm rap on the steel door. "Stand by," I called. Silence. Then a second knock. I moved to the center of the room. Thapa joined me. We stood back to back, facing outward. We heard the dragging fingertip on the metal. It traced a circle, then a 5-point star, then a spiral. Then the voices began. They came from outside, from the vents, from the very walls. They were a cacophony of imitations. My sister sobbing, Dravid barking orders, a border patrol officer shouting coordinates, child calling for help, a woman singing a lullaby I vaguely remembered from childhood. They overlapped, whispered, shouted, pleaded. "Do not acknowledge," I said, my voice a flat line. Rule 7. Rule 6 is for visual contact only. We have no rule for this, so we default to silence. We wait. We waited. The voices wore at the edges of sanity. They promised rescue. They threatened terrible things. They recited my own personal history, details no one here could know. Debts, shames, lost loves. Thapa began to mutter under his breath, a Nepali prayer. I focused on inventory. I counted the tiles on the floor. I counted the breaths I took. I counted the seconds between the generator cycles. The voices coalesced into a single clear sentence, spoken by a chorus of them in perfect unison. It came from the main door. "John, you are alone." It was a statement. It was not a question. It felt true. In that moment, with the howling choir outside and Thapa trembling beside me, I felt utterly, profoundly alone. The rules screamed in my head. Never say I am alone. But they had said it. They had named the feeling. And I wanted to agree. I wanted to scream back into the void. Yes, I am alone. I opened my mouth. Thapa's hand shot out and gripped my wrist. His fingers were like iron. He shook his head once, his eyes wide with a warning that cut through the noise. I closed my mouth. I swallowed the words. I nodded. We stood our ground. For hours. The voices tried other tactics. They fell silent, leaving a ringing emptiness more terrifying than the noise. They played recordings of our own previous conversations back to us. They mimicked the sound of the relief convoy arriving, of jeep engines, of friendly shouts. We did not move. We followed the rules we had. We maintained the salt line. We kept a hand on the central column. We did not answer to our names. Near dawn, the voices ceased. The dogs were gone. The radios remained dead. The silence was absolute. The relief convoy arrived 3 days later, right on schedule. A young private got out, his face fresh and unlined by the mountain wind. He looked around with a mix of apprehension and boredom. Thapa handled the transfer of supplies. I stood by the door, watching. The sergeant in charge of the convoy approached me. "Rough few days. We lost all comms with you." "Storm interference," I said, the lie automatic and smooth. He nodded, not really caring. "This is Specialist Ellis. He's your replacement. You're to come back with us. Debrief at base." I looked at Ellis. He was checking his phone. No signal, of course. He was just a kid. He had no idea. I took him inside. I showed him the locker, the map, the radio. I handed him the key to the supervisor's closet. Then I took the 3 sheets of paper from the wall. The core rules, the amendments, the emergency protocols. I had recopied them onto clean, new paper. Damiseu, handwriting was precise, surgical. "This is your job," I said, placing the papers in his hands. "Read them, memorize them. Your life depends on it. There are no exceptions. There is no negotiation." He glanced at the first page, a smirk playing on his lips. "Right, weird rules." I grabbed his arm, not hard, but firmly enough to make him look at me. My eyes were the ones that didn't blink enough now. "They are not weird rules. They are operational parameters. Follow them. Or you will die here. Do you understand?" The smirk vanished. He swallowed. "I understand." I released him. I gathered my few personal items. My duffel was much lighter than when I arrived. The stone of debt in my gut was gone, replaced by a different weight, cold and permanent. I stepped outside. The morning air was crisp. The track wound down the mountain back to the world. I took one last look at outpost Kanchenjunga 7. It sat against the rock, silent, waiting. Thapa nodded to me from the doorway. Ellis was already inside, probably reading the first rule. I turned and walked down the path, counting my steps. I did not look back. I knew the rules. I knew what watched from the tree line. I knew the price of a moment's hesitation. The weight in my chest was the knowledge that I had survived, and that survival had a shape. It was a list. It was a procedure. It was a count of 12, and somewhere in a bank account far from here, a sum of money waited. It was enough. It would have to be. I walked toward the waiting jeep, my steps measured, my eyes on the gravel, already missing the terrible, clarifying simplicity of the rules.